Warning. If you have a heart condition, do not read this. You will drop to the floor flopping like a fish while clenching your heart, seeing as you just had a heart attack. Also, if you have a sensitive anus, do not listen to this. The brick you shat will be painful. Number 1. About 5 years ago, I lived downtown in a major city in the US. I've always been a night person, so I would often find myself bored after my roommate, who was decidedly not a night person, went to sleep. To pass the time, I used to go for long walks and spend time thinking. I spent 4 years like that, walking alone at night, and never once had a reason to feel afraid. I always used to joke with my roommate that even the drug dealers in the city were polite. But all of that changed in just a few minutes of one evening. It was a Wednesday, somewhere between 1 and 2 in the morning, and I was walking near a police-patrolled park, quite a few ways from my apartment. It was a quiet night, even for a weeknight, with very little traffic and almost no one on foot. The park, as it was most nights, was completely empty. I turned down a short side street in order to loop back to my apartment when I first noticed him. At the far end of the street, on my side, was the silhouette of a man dancing. It was a strange dance, similar to a waltz, but he finished each box with an odd forward stride. I guess you could say he was dance-walking, headed straight for me. Deciding he was probably drunk, I stepped as close as I could to the road to give him the majority of the sidewalk to pass me by. The closer he got, the more I realized how gracefully he was moving. He was very tall and lanky and wearing an old suit. He danced closer and closer until I could make out his face. His eyes were open wide and wild, head tilted back slightly, looking off at the sky. His mouth was formed in a painfully wide cartoon of a smile. Between the eyes and the smile, I decided to cross the street before he danced any closer. I took my eyes off of him to cross the empty street. As I reached the other side, I glanced back and then stopped, dead in my tracks. He had stopped dancing and was standing with one foot in the street, perfectly parallel to me. He was facing me, but still looking skyward, smiles still wide on his lips. I was completely and utterly unnerved by this. I started walking again, but kept my eyes on the man. He didn't move. Once I had put about half a block between us, I turned away from him for a moment to watch the sidewalk in front of me. The street and sidewalk ahead of me were completely empty. Still unnerved, I looked back to see where he had been standing, to find him gone. For the briefest of moments, I felt relieved, until I noticed him. He had crossed the street and was now slightly crouched down. I couldn't tell for sure due to the distance and the shadows, but I was certain he was facing me. I had looked away from him for no more than 10 seconds, so it was clear that he had moved fast. I was so shocked that I stood there for some time, staring at him. And then he started moving toward me again. He took giant, exaggerated tiptoed steps as if he were a cartoon character sneaking up on someone. Except he was moving very, very quickly. I'd like to say at this point I ran away or pulled out my pepper spray or my cell phone or anything at all, but I didn't. I just stood there, completely frozen as the smiling man crept toward me. And then he stopped again, about a car length away from me, still smiling his smile, still looking at the sky. When I finally found my voice, I blurted out the first thing that came to mind. What I meant to ask was, "What the fuck do you want?" in an angry, commanding tone. What came out was a whimper. What the f... Regardless of whether or not humans can smell fear, they can certainly hear it. I heard it in my own voice, and that only made me more afraid. But he didn't react to it at all. He just stood there, smiling. And then, after what felt like forever, he turned around, very slowly, and started dance walking away. Just like that. Not wanting to turn my back to him again, I just watched him go until he was far enough away to be almost out of sight. And then I realized something. He wasn't moving away anymore, nor was he dancing. I watched in horror as the distant shape of him grew larger and larger. He was coming back my way, and this time, he was running. I ran too. I ran until I was off the side of the road and back onto a better lit road with sparse traffic. Looking behind me then, he was nowhere to be found. The rest of the way home, I kept glancing over my shoulder, always expecting to see his stupid smile, but he was never there. I lived in that city for 6 months after that night, and I never went out for another walk. There was something about his face that always haunted me. He didn't look drunk, he didn't look high, he looked completely and utterly insane. And that's a very, very scary thing to see. Number 2. This happened when I was in college. One night, after having a few drinks, I came home to my small house where I lived with 2 other girls, probably around 2:30 a.m. We were all serious students. I was probably the least serious actually, and when we partied it was not your typical UCSB mega rager. More like a small get-together with friends. We would often have a few people spend the night, sleep on our furniture, and even in our beds, whatever the case may be. That night, my roommates had had a few people over who I didn't know, and I saw when I returned home that one of them had opted to sleep on the couch. I could tell from the shadow that I saw there. But as I was passing the couch to enter my bedroom, I noticed that the figure was lying very stiff. He just had this weird energy to him. He was lying down, but it was like he was putting all of his energy into lying as still and rigid as possible. I paused and the guy quickly jerked his head to face me without moving his limbs so quickly that it startled me. I could see his wide open eyes glinting in the dark. Figuring that I'd startled him or that he was drunk or maybe on some kind of stimulant and unable to sleep, I just hurried past into my bedroom and locked the door. The dude made me nervous, and I wasn't taking any chances. I fell asleep. At 4:30 a.m. I woke up. There was a strange sound at the door, almost like somebody was drumming their fingers against the wood very quietly. I lay still and listened. There were more quiet sounds, like someone scratching the door with their fingers, which got louder and louder until it was clear that he was using both hands and scratching as fast and as hard as possible. It created an extremely loud and intimidating sound that filled me with fear. I got my cell phone and texted my roommate because I was afraid to make a sound. "Your friend is freaking me out. Is he coked out? Can you talk to him? He's banging and scratching on my door." She didn't text me back, probably because she was asleep. I texted my other roommate to the same effect, covering all my bases. Keep in mind that the scratching had been going on at this point for a couple minutes. I have no idea how he could have sustained it. Scratching a wooden door with your fingernails can't feel good. He also grabbed at the knob and jiggled it super forcefully. Because neither of them answered, I decided to call and really wake them up, though I was scared to make a sound. I know it sounds stupid, but there was something seriously horrifying about being teased like this through the door. I knew that he was trying to terrify me. I felt like a little kid, but I could tell this guy was fucked up or something and maybe the police needed to be called. And I wanted to loop my friends in since it was one of their friends. The scratching stopped abruptly and I called my roommate, who answered sleepily. "Yo, your friend is messed up. Can you please deal with it? Do we need to call the cops?" He's seriously scaring me, and he was scratching at my bedroom door. Really fucking weird. She didn't say anything for several seconds, and when she did speak, her voice had no sleepiness in it at all. "What friend?" she said. "That fucking guy that was sleeping on the couch," I said. She was quiet again. "We didn't have any guys over," she said. "Call the police." My adrenaline surged, and I told her to please lock the bedroom door as quickly as possible. I realized that I hadn't heard scratching in a while, and I had no clue where the dude had gone. Suddenly, I heard a loud banging in the other end of the house, where my roommates, Lauren and Monica, shared a bedroom. The bangs were followed by the sound of them screaming in fear. I quickly dialed the police as this maniac proceeded to bang against the, luckily, locked bedroom door of my two roommates as they screamed. The heaviness of the blows left no doubt that he was trying to break the door down. I'd told the 911 operator the situation, and she dispatched 2 squad cars. The police in Isla Vista are generally used to peeling drunks off the sidewalk and breaking up brawling frat bros. This was really serious and strange, and I think the dispatcher got the sense from my tone at how terrified I was, and she stayed on the phone with me. At one point, the banging stopped and everyone was quiet for a while. I talked with the dispatcher and suddenly looked down to see that this guy had slipped his fingers through the 1-inch gap between my door and the floor and was just kind of wiggling them around, making this weird growling sound. I screamed and backed away, which is my biggest regret about this situation, since when I look back at it, it would have been so awesome to just stomp the shit out of those fingers and hear the guy howl in pain. When the cops rolled up, I heard running and the sound of our sliding glass door opening and closing, and then he was gone. The cops never caught him. He had broken in through our side door by jimmying the lock somehow. My door was covered in what turned out to be huge gauges he'd made with a pair of scissors, which he discarded on the ground before he left. What terrifies me most about this is that I walked right past him. I looked him right in the face. I realize now that he was not trying to sleep or on drugs, but was lying so stiff like that because he was hiding. He probably heard me open the door and freaked out because he hadn't realized there was another person living there and tried to blend into the couch in the darkness. Number 3. My sister and I recently stumbled across a memory during our weekly visits. We had just moved to a suburb, our first house in a decent but isolated part of town. She was 12 and I was 7. Mom let us take our white German Shepherd for a walk. I remember the sun was setting over the desert landscape, but we weren't worried. It was nice to be able to walk unsupervised down the street. We lavished in our freedom and took our time, letting Kodak sniff and investigate everything. We had just let him off the leash and were watching him chase a rabbit. I guess that's why we didn't hear the car pull up, nor the huge man that was sneaking up behind us. Kodak was a ways off, and suddenly he turned back and looked at us. And like a streak of white lightning, he raced back towards us. He flew. I'm for sure his feet touched the earth. He blasted past our waiting arms and landed on the man behind us. We turned, and Kodak was latched on the man's arm. Kodak was a big dog with big teeth and was absolutely shredding this guy's arm. The man eventually got him off, and Kodak took a stance between us and the man. We apologized to the creep, not realizing what danger we were in. The man offered a shaky smile and told us we were good kids and stumbled off to his car. I remember there being a length of rope on the ground, which now I assume he had been holding. We looked at Kodak. He was growling and continued to growl until we made it home and he escorted us into the house. My sister told me, "Don't tell Mom or they'll kill Kodak for biting someone." It was so naive, we thought we were protecting our pet, but in actuality he saved one or both of us from a terrible fate. Much later, I learned that my hometown is an area heavy in sexual predators and violent criminals. Many of the surrounding communities had passed legislation that wouldn't allow them to live in their towns, so they lived in ours. No wonder our house was so cheap. Number 4. I'm 22 and this incident happened a year and a half ago. I had just moved into my first apartment and was going in the process of moving. The door that led into my apartment locks itself automatically when closed. So, I was going to the entrance of the apartment complex to get my mail while talking on the phone with my boyfriend. I returned to my apartment and sat on the bed while opening the mail and talking to him on the phone. I dropped the phone on the floor and it landed under the bed, so I had to lie on the floor and stretch for it. I saw something that caught my eye. There was someone under my bed. My eyes widened and I choked the urge to scream. The person lying under my bed was lying still with his back towards me and his head to his chest, so I couldn't see his face. And he didn't see me. Trying to be rational while so many thoughts rushed through my head, I picked up the phone and said, "Sorry, I dropped my phone. I'm just going to take a shower and call you back." The bathroom is right by my bed, so I hastily walked in, quietly locked the door, turned the shower on, and jumped out my window, as my apartment is on the first floor, and called the police. They told me to wait nearby, but to go to across the street and see if anyone comes out the door to the apartment complex. This was during summer and it was still light out. I placed myself across the street, hiding behind a car while watching my open bathroom window and the entry door. I called my boyfriend and he came out to me just before the police. I gave them my keys and they went inside. Only moments later, 2 cops came out holding a thin and tired-looking man. His eyes looked crazy, but he didn't try to get away. The policeman that had stood beside me and comforted me while the police searched through my house — I was a mess, shivering and crying — told me that the man stood outside my bathroom door with one of my kitchen knives waiting for me to come out. This man had somehow crept in my entry door while I was getting my mail and hid under the bed. The man that was trying to hurt me turned out to be a homeless person and was placed in a mental hospital. My boyfriend moved in with me the very next day. Number 5. In the mid-80s, my mom was a cleaner in Australia. She would clean houses in suburban areas and would sometimes do houses in rural wine regions, as we lived near both. She would leave business cards at the local shops and got most of her business this way, and some through referrals and word of mouth. One day she got a call from a lady who sounded like she was around 60, asking Mom to clean her old farmhouse. She made a lot of odd demands, and my mom would usually meet clients before taking on new business. In this case, the lady did not want to meet my mom and said she would leave the keys under the front doormat. Mom agreed, mainly because the lady was quite obviously wealthy and was offering to pay my mom substantially more than she would reasonably expect. Mom went to the house on a Monday morning and said she already felt unnerved by the long driveway. The house was essentially in the middle of a very large and very empty property. She found the keys and started cleaning. About an hour into the clean, she hears the back door shut. Mom was told no one would be at the house, so she immediately felt unsafe. She stood frozen in the kitchen for what she said felt like 3 to 4 minutes, although she said it could have been much longer. There was no other car on the property. She wanted to leave immediately, but had 2 rooms left to do. Both were bedrooms. She said as time passed and she heard nothing else, she decided that perhaps it was nothing. Or perhaps something had fallen and it wasn't the door after all. She walked up the hallway and stepped into the bedroom. All over the bed were black and white photos. As Mom had got closer, she realized the photos were all of her. Some were taken at our family home, and many others were taken at other houses my mom would clean. Some through windows or fences. She used the house phone to call the police and immediately drove to the end of the driveway. The lady ended up being investigated but continued to claim that it was a break-in. After some time, the police stopped their searching and we ended up moving to a new town 4 months later. Every time my mom tells me this story, I get serious chills. Absolutely a true story too. To the day my mom thinks that the lady had something to do with it, but why and for what purpose? Hey everyone, if you've made it this far, you'll notice I really need a good outro with some scary music and stuff, so if you're good at that, please don't hesitate to email me. My email is in the description. Also, if you guys have any requests for videos on a certain topic, please say so in the comments. I love when you guys interact with me. And to some of you viewers who are hesitating to click the subscribe button,
what are you waiting for? Just do it! Yes, you can! Just do it!